Hello, this is Dr. Jacqueline with DTP-Leadership Group. You've tuned in to Hot Topic Bold Talk, the podcast where we dive into everything that matters today. Join me as we explore the hottest trends and pressing issues with conversations that sizzle and perspectives that heat up. This is Hot Topic Bold Talk, since every chat has something cooking. Let's dive in to today's discussion. Dr. Jacqueline with DTP Leadership Group. This is podcast 84 of Hot Topic Bold Talk. And the title is Unmasking the Threat: Trump's Assault on Democracy and the Rule of Law. And the reason I've given it that title is due to the fact he has taken no responsibility for 34 criminal counts that he has against him, and that a jury of his peers brought that verdict due to his behavior. So I want you to see what's happening, the rule of law, and how it's being minimized by him. The GOP used to be the law and order party, and they are abandoning it with their addictive patterns of the way that they are relating to Trump. So I think it's important for you to wake up and for me to wake up and look at the disturbing actions that Trump and the GOP are doing and understand how they talk about what they're doing, and then also talk to your friends and family about the choices that the GOP and Trump are making that we need to really consider before we ever support him in November. There are so many articles out about the destruction of the GOP by Trump and how he's taken it over. It's no longer the GOP, it's his party. The warnings we are receiving from major magazines and media about him, and the disastrous statements he's making about what he intends to do if he gets into a second term of office. So I want to take the opportunity to present you with a number of articles and recordings and things like that, so you will be very clear what is happening. I want to start with the Atlantic and an article that occurred entitled Trump's Defeat, which happened on May 31st, 2024. The article gives us the facts about the case where he was found guilty of the 34 felony counts. As the foreman of the jury pronounced him guilty on each count, he was no longer a man to whom gravity no longer applied, but to a defendant in a courtroom like any other, one who now faces the indignities of sentencing, potentially including prison time. The New York case, like all the Trump prosecutions, has always been shadowed by the presidential race. Following the jury's announcement of the verdict, Justice Juan Mushin scheduled Trump's sentencing for July 11th, just days before he's set to formally accept the GOP's nomination for president at the Republican National Convention. Trump's political appeal has always been tied to the perceptions of his invisibility. It's like he finally has been tried and convicted of criminal actions he's taken for years. People who support him see as a force of nature, the godlike manifestation of the people's will, which is unbound by law. When Trump steps out of the courtroom after the verdict, though, to deliver his remarks to the press, he walked with hunched shoulders, declaring his innocence in a flat, exhausted tone, as if struggling to summon his typical reserves of fury, which, of course, it only took him a few days to get there. But we see that it has impacted him. On the same day, The Atlantic put out another article written by Adam Servers entitled, "Trump Wishes His Trial Were Rigged, but instead he got a fair one and was convicted by a jury of his peers." If you look at the jury itself, number 2 juror definitely would have been somebody that probably would have supported Trump, because he admitted to the fact he only listened to Fox News. So he got tried by his peers. On June 4th in 2024, he returned to his old self. In The Conversation, which is an article by Karen Anderson entitled "Trump's Rhetoric After His Felony Conviction is Designed to Distract, Stoke Fear, and Ease the Way for an anti-democratic strongman to attempt to get into office again." Here are some of the comments from the article. When Trump declared that if they can do this to me, they can do it to anyone, he was, of course, correct. Ideally, that's how the law needs to work. They should apply equally to a regular citizen and also a former president. Trump's posts on social media were designed to distract from those facts of the case by undermining the independence and trustworthiness of a judiciary and scapegoating anyone who isn't a Trump supporter. He has no respect for the law. The Guardian summarized the Republicans' responses. Here they were. It's shameful for what they did. They say it's a shameful day in American history, a sham show, trial, a kangaroo court, a total witch hunt, worthy of a banana republic. These were the reactions from senior elected Republicans who once claimed the mantle of the party was law and order. To the news that Donald Trump had become the first former U.S. president convicted of a crime. In her book, Demagoguery and Democracy, communication scholar Patricia Roberts Millers explains that we don't have demagoguery in our culture because a demagogue has to come into power. When demagoguery becomes the normal way of participating in a public discord, then it's just a question of time unless demagoguery arises. A demagogue has arisen. That's Trump, and she talks about it. Now, Bill Penzies has constantly warned us about Trump and continues to repeat what massive number of resources are telling all of us. In his newsletter on June 5th, Penzies Spices, he says the following: looks like Donald Trump got away with being unanimously convicted of 34 crimes without losing any Republican support or having any elected Republican call for the end of his presidential candidacy. Then Bill says, the good news is it takes more than the support of a party to win a presidential election. Maybe it's too early to define what this is all means, but while Republicans circled the wagons and broke funding records, it looks like the rest of America is finally starting to wake up to just see how dangerous the Republican addiction is to Donald Trump. On June 4th, 2024, at 10:34 a.m. Eastern Time, David A. Graham of The Atlantic wrote the article, "Lara Trump Failed the Hogan Test." The Republican Party is turning away from candidates who support the rule of law. Last week, minutes before a jury announced that it had found former President Donald Trump guilty of 34 felonies, Hogan a Republican who's running in Maryland, posted on X, regardless of the results, I urge all Americans to respect the verdict and the legal process. At this dangerously divided moment in our history, all leaders, regardless of party, must not pour fuel on the fire with more toxic partisanship. We must reaffirm what has made this nation great, the rule of law. I'm grateful that he had the courage to say these things. And once upon a time, respecting the rule of law was very much a part of America, and it has been very important to our nation. What I think is sad is it is no longer respected by the GOP mega Republicans that are supporting Trump. One of his Trump aides, who is also a top Republican National Committee official, replied, "You just ended your campaign," when Hogan made those comments. Today, as Lara, and we're talking about the 4th, as Lara Trump attacks the rule of law itself, responsible to Trump skeptical conservatives are criticizing her, but rather than recoiling from the substance, they seem most worried that she is endangering the GOP's chances of winning a Senate seat. Scholars who study threats to democracy have found that the words and actions of political leaders are an essential factor in driving the spread and effect of anti-democratic attitudes. Tim Nararli predicted on Friday that trashing the judicial system would become a new litmus test for any Republican who wants to remain in Donald Trump's good graces. In the NDRC newsletter on June 3rd, 2024, at 4:59 p.m., we are reminded of the Supreme Court pact with Trump appointees and what they have been doing. And what I respect about this newsletter is they've taken a number of resources to quote what is happening with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's new voting rights decision is like a love letter to gerrymandering. That's what is said in Vox, VOX. They've sided with Republicans in South Carolina over their voting map. That's from the New York Times that he's included in his newsletter. Samuel Alito's opinions are just as upside down as his flag, says The Nation. Justice Alito for Republican justices over the dissent of Democratic justices rewrites racial gerrymandering standards to help white Republican states. That's from the Election Law blog. Supreme Court approves South Carolina congressional map previously found to dilute Black voting power. That's from CNN. SCOTUS approves racially gerrymandered South Carolina voting map. That's from the Democracy Now! Organization. And the U.S. Supreme Court upholds South Carolina's congressional map, dismantles racial gerrymandering precedent. And that's from the Democracy docket. So we're getting loads of people calling out the lack of respect for the law. The Week magazine on June 7, 2024, has the article written by David Austin Walsh from the New York Times entitled The GOP's Unified Reich Generation, REICH. The GOP's extreme problem goes far beyond Donald Trump and David Austin Walsh. There's a new generation of new Republican staff members who are openly embracing white nationalism and neo-Nazi symbols and terminology. A Trump aide posted a video on Truth Social last week featuring fake headlines about Trump's reelection, with one mentioning the creation of a unified Reich. A suggestion that his second term would put us on a glide path toward neo-Nazi Germany. Last summer, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis had to fire a star speechwriter for making a campaign video with clear Nazi imagery. The January 6th insurrection was laced with right-wing extremists flying Confederate flags. If he wins, Trump vows to replace thousands of career civil servants with the mega loyalist. White nationalists dreaming of a unified Reich in America could soon occupy positions of real power. So start being concerned, really listen to what is happening. Another example is, let me show you what is happening in Texas, where I live, which is currently highly controlled by mega Republicans that are avid supporters of Trump. In a number of newspapers and magazines, we see what Beto O'Rourke has summarized in his newsletter. He is giving us a warning that every mega Republican-controlled state will have the same kind of extreme positions in their platforms that we have in Texas. The Texas Republicans just adopted a new platform at their state convention that pushes their radical and anti-democracy agenda to new extremes. If enacted through legislation, as their members have committed to do, their new plan will require the Bible to be taught in public schools and will fuel new attacks on reproductive health in the LGBT community. Most alarming, the Texas GOP platform calls for new laws that will no longer allow the winner of the popular vote in Texas to hold office if they don't also win a majority of the Texas counties. You have a lot of small counties where it's ridiculous even thinking about something like that. Republicans clearly understand that it's only a matter of time before Democrats win statewide in Texas. And they're trying to change the rules of our elections before that can happen. Barack Obama lost the state by 16 points in 2012. 4 years later, Hillary Clinton lost by 9 in 2020. Joe Biden lost Texas by a little more than 5%. Texas is turning blue faster than any other battleground state in the country. Republicans have done everything that they can to entrench themselves in power by reducing voting rights, including racially gerrymandering the state, closing hundreds of polling places, imposing the harshest voter ID laws in the country, and targeting Harris County, which is a Democratic county, for the most intense suppression and intimidation campaign in the country. This is a state that already lacks online voter registration, same-day voter registration, or automatic voter registration. So do not be surprised when you see the platforms of the GOP and other states that are controlled by mega Republicans. And I think the thing you need to realize most is recently Donald Trump said he's looking at policies to restrict access to contraception. The Senate is supposedly to vote before the Friday 6-7 anniversary of the Griswold versus Connecticut the Supreme Court decision which established the rights to contraception nearly 60 years ago. Trump proponents are not going just after the right to have an abortion. They're going to try everything they can to place women in a very archaic world where there is no contraception. So don't forget it. In this episode, let me be clear in my conclusion. In this episode, we've examined a litany of critical and viable sources that paint a stark picture of the dangers posed by Donald Trump to our American democratic process and to the rule of law in the United States. From the Atlantic to the New York Times to many other resources that I provided you this evening, respected publications and thought leaders have detailed his convictions, rhetoric, and the GOP alarming argument with anti-democratic principles. These accounts are not just warnings. They are urgent calls. They are urgent calls for us to take action. The stakes have never been higher. The erosion of our democratic norms and institutions threatens the very foundation of our society. We must remain vigilant, informed, and proactive in defending our democracy. As you head into November, arm yourself with the facts. Listen to my podcast because I'm trying to prevent as many facts as possible, to engage in meaningful conversation with those around you, and recognize the critical importance of your vote. This is not just about a single election. It's about the future of our country. Together, we can uphold the values that define us as a nation and ensure that the rule of law prevails. Thank you so much for joining me for this critical topic. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's continue to fight for a just and democratic America. Thank you for listening. There you have it. Another episode of Hot Topic Bold Talk is in the books. We journeyed through today's discussion, uncovering diverse perspectives and shedding light on a very critical matter. A massive thanks to all of you that are my listeners. I really appreciate you, and I'm so glad you're a part of this adventure. Feel free to drop your views in the polls and the Q&A section. It's really important for me to hear from you and know how you feel or what you think about my podcast. Gear up for more intriguing discussions in our next episode. Until then, stay connected, stay engaged, and let's keep those conversations buzzing. Thank you.